Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Wiam Nemu, and this month we are celebrating Jewish Heritage Month. And our first guest for the month is Edith Covensky. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm going to share your bio here and then I'll share how we met.
Sure.
So Edith is a Hebrew poet living in Michigan and teaching at Wayne State University. Her topics are diverse and include Israeli culture, a pluralistic perspective, trends and themes in Middle Eastern cinema, women poets of the Middle East, modern Hebrew, and new soil, old roots, the immigration experience. She is also on the editorial board of the annual literary journal, Psyfes, dedicated to Israeli and classical poetry. And Edith's 36th book, A Reality That Is Not, was just released. How exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I just received it yesterday, and a version is coming out in Israel. It hasn't come out yet, but it's in the process. But this is in the American version. It came out here in America. And that's my first hard book in America, which I'm very excited about.
Well, congratulations. We met through our vice chairperson, Asma Jamil.
Mm-hmm.
And Asma was one of your students at Wayne State University, and I guess you left a very memorable impression on her. You also helped in a way. We're doing a lot of research currently about Chaldeans, and she remembered a book that you had brought to her attention. Actually, now I don't have it in front of me, but I'll mention it in a second, where there was a book by a Jewish author who wrote about the Chaldeans, and his book that she was researching. And you and her reconnected, and then she invited you at the Chaldean Cultural Center where you saw the museum, and you and I had a chat. And that's when I learned about your work and was so impressed. I graduated from Wayne State University, and I was just so impressed with your work. And then I found out you have all these books of poetry. So, we invited you. It's just so appropriate for this month. But then when we spoke, I found really an intriguing background. So you were born in Romania and grew up in Israel. Very fascinating childhood, I'm sure. Please share that with us.
Well, in Romania, I was born in Romania. I was very little. I don't remember. I have no recollection of my experiences there, except for my mother saying that I was born. I was 7 months, a 7-month-year-old baby. I almost didn't make it. She kept me. They didn't have incubators at the time, and so she kept me in cotton and near the stove, so to be warm. And there was a chance that I won't survive. But apparently I did. And then we were smuggled out. My mother, father, myself, we were smuggled out from Romania just before the communists came. And we were detained in Cyprus by the British, like the story of the Exodus. And we were there for about 6 months, and I contracted typhus there. So that was the second hurdle. And then in Israel, once Israel was declared a state, we came to Israel, and I contracted TB. So in the first 4 or 5 years of my life, there was some kind of troubles, obstacles, actually, that somehow I made through it. But my memorable experience, or the major experience besides the schooling and everything, and the neighborhood that I lived in, very diverse. I heard languages, people from all over, not only Jewish people, but also Arab people. And we were neighbors, and there were no problems. I grew up in peace and in collaboration with living well with all my neighbors, all our neighbors. But the most memorable experience was my army, being in the army, Israeli army for, instead of 24 months, I was there for 20 months. They reduced, this is just the first time that they reduced the service for girls. I don't know what they did for boys, but for girls, 4 months. And that was faithful. That's why I'm mentioning it, because that was extremely faithful. And then I'll tell you why later on. So, and the army was important to me. There was peaceful time at those years, 63, 65. And the army was important to me because it taught me to get over obstacles. It taught me responsibility, teamwork. It hardened me. It hardened me for life. I don't think that I would have made it here in America without this experience behind me. So this I can tell you about my experiences, my early experiences.
So how many were you the only child?
I was the only child.
You
Yeah,
were
my
the only
mother
child.
couldn't bear any more kids. She hardly had me. I was 7 months. So
And then you gave her such a hard time that you were a handful.
She was wonderful. She was so dedicated. She was so she helped. She cured me. And also in Cyprus was a English. I didn't mention it was an English doctor who actually took me to private quarters because I had a very high fever. I probably would have perished in the regular ward. And she actually saved my life. And then before my mother boarded the ship to go to Israel, she said, "Well, you're going to be hard times and hard things. I'll take her to England with me, and I'll adopt her, and she'll have a good life, and so on." But my mother, of course, and you are young, you can have more children. That's what she told my mom. But my mom, of course, she refused, and here I am. Because my life would have been totally different. Yeah, I would have written. I would probably wouldn't written Hebrew poetry. Yeah.
And so you in Israel after high school is when you serve
Yes,
your 20 months.
mandatory. It's mandatory unless you are of a religious background that is checked. You cannot just say that. Or if you medical reasons,
Mm-hmm.
or if you have to support your family, let's say, if they depend on you. Yeah.
And so when did you move to the United States? And did you start poetry before you moved here or after?
No, I never wrote poetry. I never thought about poetry. I think when I was 8 years old, there was a woman poet, Leah Goldberg, that actually I'm teaching, that impressed me. But I just read her, but I never thought that I would do the same. I started writing in my mid-30s, so that's late. After I finished, actually, I majored in French literature. I took my PhD exams in French literature, and Hebrew was actually my minor. And we needed, and a cognate was German. And I took Hebrew. The Hebrew at Wayne was weak at the time, and so I took a year of courses at University of Michigan at U of M for the preparation for the exams. So I started late. And I never thought I would come to America. When I was in the army, my certificate was already in Jerusalem at the Hebrew U. And what happened, because that's why I mentioned, because they shortened the service by 4 months. So I finished my military service in July. My father, who was working, he was an officer in the Zim, it still exists, the Zim shipping company, Israeli shipping company. It still exists today. And today it's more the merchant, it's more cargo. And but anyways, he came home and he says, "I have one more trip to the Great Lakes," where he met his brother here, and the family. And he said, "If you want to come." After the army, a lot of kids, if they have the opportunity, they go for a trip. They go on trips. So he took me and my mom on the ship, and we arrived right here in the Detroit River. I actually got off the boat, literally, literally. So then I stayed with, the ship left. They had to leave for 10 days. They went to Chicago, and then they went to Canada, to Hamilton, and they stayed there. They had cargo there. So I had 10 days to decide whether I want to stay in America, and I decided to give it a chance. So here I am. My journey continues. It hasn't ended. Yeah.
And you, I want to go. Not only it hasn't ended, you're so productive as a writer, and in your teachings, very, very active, and you've authored 36 books. So I want to ask you what inspires your productivity, but also first, I want to ask about you describing yourself as a Hebrew poet. How has your Jewish heritage impacted your identity and influenced your writing?
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember that I studied, French literature for many, many years, and all my life actually. Uh, so um, so I never thought I would write poetry, number one, and I never thought I would write it in Hebrew. Uh, so so I would say that my poetry is because of that. So I have two backgrounds in a way. I have this universal, general background, and I have the Jewish background, and it did impact, and it does impact my poetry. But as a whole, I would think that the poetry is existential and universal, and it applies to all of us. I think each and one of us can identify with the themes that I write. I write about the grid of life. I write about relationships. I write about hopes and loves and disappointments and dreams and so on. So that we all share. Uh, so so, but maybe there is a Jewish, I would say maybe a cadence or a nigun, as they say in Hebrew, a chant, a sort of chant that is going through the verses, and specifically, and you can see it by the title of the books that most of the titles are not specifically Jewish titles. But I have two books that I did dedicate. One, Jerusalem Poems, and the other one, Poems of the Holocaust. But throughout the poetry, there's also God. I'm also addressing a God, a divine. Um, so I speak to him, and he speaks to me, but not in a necessarily religious sense. But for me, he is a totality, maybe that we're lacking here down on earth, a wholeness, a power that sometimes I cling to in the poetry, and I talk to it. I talk intimately to him, in a comfortable way. Um, and there are times that he talks to me. So that God is there, even in this new book that I have. Somehow, and I also feel that perhaps the grace of God gives me this ability to do what I'm doing, which I didn't plan to do, yeah, at all.
Well,
So
and I want to mention, I'd love if you could read a few poems for us, but I want to mention too, before you do that, that, your poetry, have they all been translated? Most have been translated from Hebrew to English,
yes,
Hebrew to French, to Arabic. So for the most, yeah. So
yes, I was very
that's
proud that.
wonderful. And the fact that you can reach so much of an audience. And, most poetry that I've read or the good one anyway, is very universal. So, yeah. So if you don't mind, if you can read a few poems for us, that would be so
Sure,
lovely.
sure. Well, I put, because of the time constraint, I picked two poems. One poem is from the book Jerusalem Poem, that was I published in 1996, and it's called Wall, and in Hebrew it's kotel, and the kotel is the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, but the translator translated it as wall. So here you'll see that really God speaks to me. And I started the verse like that. God speaks to me among quick words, warming a day of scattered rain, falling opposite words, whispering love, exactly as in a round night, close to primeval pain, written on the wall, descending in shallow time. Why have I all these thoughts? Facing a bus, ascending the street, rolling a poem on dark asphalt, among words enfolding to a lovely language of the moment, like an ancient dirge, and a silent shadow turning among domes and arches, and crowded people and stone. So this is my
Thank
poem.
you so much.
This
Yes.
is my poem Kotel. And then I would read one more from my book that I just received yesterday. It happened to be received. I had a copy um, from the publisher before, so I could have used that too. But this is the actual book, and I picked again to connect it to Jewish theme. I picked the poem that is titled Tikkun. Tikkun in Hebrew or in Jewish thought is repair. And it refers to repair of the world. And how do we repair? Can we repair the world? Is by good deeds. And so in this poem, there's also a repair, but here I repair words. And maybe this repair of words, maybe can contribute to the repair of the world. In the macro sense, in the bigger sense, and maybe in the mini sense, it maybe helps to repair my inner self. And so this is the poem, Tikkun. There is something in this poem, like the fear of the dark, rolling among the puddles of words, crowded into the corridor of night, and love breaking in me, careful in tune. And I repair words, quick in the wind, blasting from star to star, in a potential dream, trapping my love alive in the glory of the moment, like a flower of fantasy, and like a muse giving me poem after poem. And then I talk to God, bound in the lofty discourse, twirling with greatest temptation, fading in dissonant things, melding in a sun revealing fantasy, wandering in the thicket of light, becoming as if from childhood. So this is Tikkun. This is Tikkun. And of course, I don't analyze my poems.
So, we could have had the whole show just listening to your poetry. It's so lovely.
Anytime I love to share.
And I want you just to share, I want to move on to the next question, but really, it's such a lovely day for us to be celebrating the month, because also you mentioned to me, I wasn't aware that today is
Yom Jerusalem Day. Yes, today
it's Jerusalem Day. So yeah, and I said, oh, what a blessing, what a blessing that we have that.
It's such a coincidence, such a beautiful coincidence.
It's a beautiful coincidence, yes. And then, since you mentioned your poems and God and this coincidence, it all matches. So, your teachings at Wayne State University, tell us about your teaching career, when you started there, and what did you start teaching originally, and what's going on today? Like, how has that how is your teachings influencing the students, especially those of Middle Eastern backgrounds?
Yes. And I do have diverse students, teach diverse classes and diverse students, and I love them both the students and what I teach. I started in 1987, and as I started to write poetry, but they called me. I didn't think about even teaching at Wayne. Everything good that happened to me, I didn't think about that it will happen. I got a call that one of the professors is going on a sabbatical, the one that teaches Hebrew, if I would come for one semester. That there was the semester of the winter of '87, and I was so thrilled. I was so happy even to teach one semester. So I went, and I don't know what I did. I didn't care for the text that was used. But so I gathered whatever I had. Remember, I was in French. So, but I have a library of Hebrew books, and a bigger library, you can imagine, since then. But I gathered whatever I had, and I thought, and I don't know what I did actually. But I guess the students loved it, and they wrote a petition, made a petition for me to come back. And then in the fall I came back. In the winter I didn't, and I was in Israel. And after that, um, and the chair of when I was in Israel, the chair happened to be there too, and he came for my poetry reading. I went to Israel because my first book came out, Small Blessings. My second, Syncopations, because it was '87. Yeah. So, anyways, he was there. He came to my reading, and after that, I was hired in the following fall, and I'm there since then. I didn't plan on it. There was supposed to be one semester. So,
Well,
and the former professor who taught there, I mean, he was a historian, so he didn't care that much about the Hebrew. And so every time he saw me in the corridor, he said, he went like this, one semester. And the one semester became what? How many years? Over 30 years.
oh,
Yes.
wow.
87.
So,
Yeah. And I developed because they only had, in fact, there was a rabbi that was teaching there. And I don't know if he might have taught religious Hebrew and biblical Hebrew. I mean, and I developed the modern Hebrew literature. I added, the also poetry. I'm teaching today poetry of the Middle East, not only women, Israeli poets, but also poets from the Arab world, including from Iraq. Yeah, yeah,
well, I mean, the story, it's easy to believe because, as I mentioned, that our vice chairperson, Asma, who
yes,
introduced me to you, so she said first of all, she just was very influenced and she remembered you so well. And she said, if you sit with her, you don't, you can just keep going on and conversing.
yeah.
But she
I
remembered,
was,
yeah, but years later, she recalled, as I said, we were doing research about Chaldeans, and she recalled, and I brought up the book that she remembers you bringing up, A Provocative People, A Secular History of the Jews.
mhm.
And she said, I remembered her mentioning it and what it had in it. And then she did some research, and the author talks about the Chaldeans. So this is really how good professors, teachers, and not just professors, any teaching, it really, when it comes from the heart and the way it's brought forth, it sticks to the students to where today, what you mentioned for her, we're using that as part of our research
Yes,
project. So
General,
thank you so much. So
you're
your presence at Wayne State is very, very important,
thank you,
especially given the community that's here in Michigan.
thank
And
you.
that's what I was gonna talk about next is, so you live in West Bloomfield, a city that has the second largest population of Chaldeans in Michigan. There are many Chaldean American students at Wayne State University. I mean, and there's just a very large Arab American community in general in the state of Michigan. Um, but what have you learned about this community through your interactions with them?
So my students, I've learned that, first of all, they're very hardworking. They're very diligent, like Asma was, and I felt that also they're very close to their community. The community, the family community means a lot to them, and they also very proud of their heritage. And then I learned, especially also when I visited the youth center, that you're striving and you keep striving to preserve this heritage, and I respect it an awful lot because this is what we're trying to do. Jewish people too, all people, I think people try to. but I felt this big the energy that goes into um, keeping and making your heritage be known and be stable and be with us. And I saw the museum and I was impressed. And so I learned a lot. And then all the Chaldeans I meet, they're also very friendly to me, and they know that they know I'm Israeli, they know I'm Jewish. But in fact, I just met some people not too long ago um, um, as well. There is a rapport, there is a chemistry that
Well,
I
yeah,
feel.
there's a lot of the similarities
Yeah,
that we share, but the fact that the what we have endured and the Jewish community been having escaped all of that and rebuilt themselves before us. So we've learned quite a bit from the Jewish community. And I have found that anytime I've reached out with any kind of question or in need of anything, they're always available to help.
yeah,
That's no, most people are in general, but there's that deeper, I think, the connection of having been
yeah,
repressed, pushed out of our homelands, or having gone through genocides or whatever. There is that commonality, and that creates a greater compassion and sympathy, I think, which is just
exactly.
part of human nature,
Yeah.
for that to happen.
And actually, Abraham came from Ur
And
Chaldees.
Abraham came from Ur, and Jesus was Jewish, and there's on and on. And the Aramaic language, I mean, if we were to do a book on the similarities,
Yeah,
we'd have a pretty thick book or a volume of books.
exactly. And even the Chaldean language, we have, I think, the Hebrew months, I think they're similar in Chaldean, as like Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, they are the
I
same.
mean, I just threw like one of my recent discoveries I had told you is Ariel Sabars, who's going to be our guest for next week. When I read his book, My Father's Paradise, I had no clue that there was Kurdish Jews. So, and then that their Aramaic is just like ours. And I thought, oh
Yeah,
my goodness, so this is why it's so much fun to continue learning about other communities, because
exactly.
you learn
Exactly.
about the differences, and then through those differences you end up learning about so
So,
much similarities.
similarities, I agree
It's
100%.
really wonderful.
I agree.
So, what has been your career sounds lovely. I mean, being a poet of that many books and teaching, and you have all the like what looks very
Yeah,
prestigious and very lovely lifestyle.
still
But
going
what
strong. Still going strong.
has still going strong? So, but what has been your greatest challenge in your career path?
Uh, I think, well, the immediate challenge, especially at Wayne, was the building the program, and I have to say the administration I always agreed with the courses that I want to teach, and so that I'm thankful to that. So that was a challenge, but the bigger challenge was to how to balance my responsibilities to school, to teaching, and and the writing, and then my family. So not to neglect one or the other. And I don't know. I think sometimes I succeeded, sometimes maybe I failed, um, uh, because writing and teaching is my life. And but so that was really my biggest challenge, and I hope that I somehow succeeded in bridging between these two separate worlds. Yeah, not only in localities, not only geographically, um, but also otherwise, responsibility wise, or I hope that my family didn't feel neglected, or that I gave all my love to my students and not
Well,
to
it's never gonna, yeah, no matter what you give to everything, they want more anyway. It's never, they will probably would want to have a little bit more, but it seems like you're a very compassionate person, and I think that
I try. I try.
yeah.
And I don't know. I try it instinctively because I get those feedbacks from the students, and I don't really, I don't see myself doing those things, but I guess I do. And if I remember that even my daughter wanted to be in my class, and she actually joined. She did her undergraduate school at Indiana. Then she moved to Michigan, and she wanted. I didn't think she would want to be where I am, but she wanted to be, and she came. She took Hebrew as a foreign language. It
So
was,
your impact is there, definitely.
she was in my classroom, and she studied fair and square, and it was very objective. I tried to be very objective.
So we have like a minute left,
Okay.
and it's the last question that I have is, what's next for you? What's your next project?
Okay, so Bill, I'm going really fast in a minute. There is a forward in this new book, a reality that is not, by my former translator, who I worked with him over 20 years, and he used to write beautiful, beautiful prefaces or forwards to the books, and they were short, but like I think they were gems. He said important things and very strong things and very dense. So what I would like to do next is I have a book of all his prefaces, and actually I can show. I have some notes on it because that I just prepared. So this is the book that with all these prefaces includes all these prefaces. As I said, they are short. They're not from all the books. That's from 1992 to I think 205, 20, yeah, 205, 2005. So what I like to do is expand this because he says such important things and add poet poems to that. For each preface, I want to add poet poems from the books he's talking about, and to publish it. And maybe also a section of new poems and publish it. So that's my next project.
Well, we look forward to your whatever work you do. And I also look forward to visiting with you again because it was so lovely. And we did say, we need to meet again. So that's in the works. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a beautiful Jerusalem day. It's a blessed day. We're going to go and enjoy it. It's beautiful weather outside. Thank you very much. Oh, here's somebody that said, loved hearing and watching this and meeting Edith. Thank you, Zilka. This is Zilka Joseph is actually she's of Jewish background and from India, and she's a dear friend and she's a poet. Zilka Joseph, yes. So yes, I'm glad you were able to join us, Zilka. Yes. Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day.
Yes. And thank you for all the listeners. And I hope that I did well. I'm not sure.
Yes, it was wonderful hearing you and hearing your experience. Yeah, it's very rich experience, and thank you for your poetry as well.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And if you want to listen to it anytime, I'm ready.
Yes. We'll have you at the Cultural Center one day.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.